Don't dislocate your arm patting yourself on the back.
Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Darksiders 3 Apocalyptic difficulty video walkthrough. This is me swapping between my gems on my weapon after killing Avarice so I can get some ambient souls, and this is going to cover the Cistern to the Sin Sloth. So do you remember the Vulgarum point that was near where we fought Wrath? Over here there was a web that we couldn't get through because we didn't have the Flame Hollow, and then just behind me there is this area that leads upwards. This is the area that's going to lead to the next Sin. The area coming up, guys, is a bit of a difficulty increase as far as the mobs, and then the boss itself has one of the worst runbacks in the game. The runback to this next boss is I can't even begin to tell you. It hurts me on such a fundamental level that if I'd have not been committed to making this walkthrough, I would have probably stopped. And the thing is, right, Sloth is not a bad boss. He's not a great boss because there's a couple of glaring problems that could be easily fixed. But I love what he looks like. I love his design. I love his like sassy camp voice. I love the fact he's just this big fat bug that sits on a throne of other bugs who just doesn't give a shit. He's just big old dirty slothy greedy person. He's a cool character. The fight is shit. The fight is super simple. His hitboxes are nuclear sized. They have incredible amounts of active frames, and the amount of times you're going to get hit by them because you make a bad dodge is off the charts. But the true problem is, you have to run back through an area that's tougher than the boss to get to him. It's like a 40-second run back with two enemies that are incredibly dangerous, only to get back to the boss to have to do the first phase, which is annoying, and then to get to the second phase, and then you get one-touched by a move with incredible range. The worst offender is when the interim between the first two phases, when it gives you control, you get hit by a bug, which happens all the time. I'm going to talk about that when it happens though, guys, because there's some stuff to discuss here first before we get more into Sloth. So these husks can actually have creatures in them. Be very careful too, because the creatures do a sneak attack. You've seen it before, just bear with it. This guy is really interesting, but he's another one who has incredibly active hitboxes. Do you see his claw attack? Do you see how it lingers behind him for like a second before it settles back to his normal stance? All of that time is active. So if you were stood on that side where he hooks around and you were behind him, he would hurt you on the back edge. There are a lot of bosses that do that. Lust is terrible for it. Lust has a swing that pokes behind her at the end of the animation that should not have active hurtbox on it, but does. So if you dodge behind her at the wrong angle, she pokes you after when you come out of your iframes. And it's just... I can't say that Dark Souls doesn't have that, because it does, so maybe it's just a beautiful homage to a better game. But what I can tell you is there's nothing more frustrating than dodging a move only to get hit by the back edge of it. Like, Lords of the Fallen, the Castlevania game they made a few years ago, was one of the funniest games I've ever played for stupid hitboxes like that, because a boss could raise a hammer above his head, and as he's doing it, he could touch you with his navel, and it would count as if you got hit by the hammer. And that, to me, is the dumbest fucking thing on the planet and just laughably terrible, but that's how that game worked. This game doesn't even have the courtesy to do that, which is equally terrible. But coming down here we have a black jumper, and when we have another one of those trap husks, and then we have a couple of the Turok 2 mites. The creatures that come out of these casts over here are really interesting, because when you see them naturally, they remind me of Mimic, the movie by Guillermo del Toro, which is about these insects that were created to imitate their predator to get rid of like an infestation of these bugs that was ruining the environment. But they continued to grow, and instead of eradicating that predator, they focused on us. So they mimic humans to kind of like kill us. And all they do is these bugs have essentially turned themselves into really like sneaky looking Nosferatu dudes in coats, but they're not coats, it's just wings and stuff. But in darkened alleyways, they look like, you know, lonely strangers who've got their coats wrapped up over themselves to keep the cold out, and they're just shuffling about, but they're actually bugs. And there's an enemy, that enemy in particular, when you see it naturally, which is coming up, it reminds me so much of that movie. And if you've never seen Mimic, I recommend it a lot. I think it's like 1998, it's got Mira Sorvino in it, who I really like. And it was a cool horror movie. I watched it as a kid, it shit me up. Do you see him? He's there. See him just kind of walking around, he looks like a person, and he's like having a stutter fist. He's not meant to do this, that's a problem. But Doesn't he look like just some old, shambling, homeless guy wearing a long coat? Super mimicky. And if you've seen that movie, awesome on you, because it's a cool one. Another one from that time frame that I remember really liking as a kid that scared me was Relic. Somebody brings back these leaves from like a foreign country, and it creates this weird chimeran creature. I don't remember how good the story was. It's probably fucking stupid. But suffice to say, scary, really dark museum at night. Monster that's got like several different animals all woven into one. Lots of gore. Scared the balls off me as a kid. But I wish I knew the bestiary in this game, but I don't. I could tell you what these creatures are called, these mimic guys. There's a couple of them in this area, and we get to do our first bout of swimming. And the swimming actually controls really well, which is funny because you don't do much of it. There's an entire sequence later on full of swimming, but you don't have to do it because at that point you have an ability that lets you step on the water. And unlike mimics can't step on the water, so that guy killed himself, bless him. But always dodge through these casts so that you don't get hit like I did just then. Luckily, the Nephilim's Respite, which are the items that you get, that is an Estus flask. When you kill enemies, if the enemy releases a green orb, it will give you a flask back, and that's essentially what it is. It's a pretty cool healing system that I quite like. The thing you need to bear in mind, though, when it comes to healing, guys, is it's slow. It's slow, and it doesn't counteract damage, which is another one of those wonderful moments where they imitate Souls and they fuck it up. In Dark Souls, when you heal, the heal is immediate. And if you get hit when you're healing, it will counteract the damage that you just took. So traditionally, as you chug and something hits you, you won't die. It'll just take a lot of the heal from you. In this game, it doesn't matter. You just die. Happens all the time. I saw Darkside Phil complaining about it the other day. It was really funny. So a lot of the times, I don't even bother healing because it just means that I can run past it and not get clipped next time, which is definitely something that I recommend. Another thing that's good to note as well, guys, is the more exploring you do, the more humans you'll find. The more humans you find, the more lurchers and souls you'll actually get, which makes it much more lucrative to get the levels and everything. So definitely be on the lookout for saving the humans. There's an achievement for getting 25 of them, and I do not find anywhere near that number, but if there exists 25, you have opportunities to get way more orbs than I do, so make sure you do it. There's probably walkthroughs for that already on YouTube, because people have had this game for ages. It took me so long to beat it as well, guys. It kicked my ass, it must be said. As much as the game kicked my ass, and I want to shit on it like everyone else seems to be doing, I still think there's a good game here. I just think it's a game that's been misled. It's a game that got so fixated on becoming something else that it forgot to be itself. And coming from a game that's really never been itself and always imitated other series, it sounds like a really, really strange thing, but it's true. The thing that made Darksiders great wasn't the Zelda influences or the God of War influences, it was the little things that made it Darksiders. The God of War stuff just added to the formula and made it more fun. The Zelda stuff just gave you really cool places to solve puzzles in. Those things made it a great game, but it was the little things that made it a Darksiders. And this game, it's low-key pandering to Souls in the worst way possible, because it hurts the Darksider aspect of it. Nothing in Souls works well in Darksiders. It just doesn't. They're just two different games. Ironically enough as well, the worst part, Darksiders came out first. Darksiders wasn't the copycat, it was the trendsetter. Souls came after. Souls could have copied Darksiders, but they didn't, because they wanted to be their own thing. Yet Darksiders is so terrified of being its own thing and building on what it had that they completely redesigned it. And they redesigned it like a committee, because what's popular these days? You know? Bizarre, broken games that people think are fun. So we'll just copy that, because that's a good idea, right? Like, can you think of anything that is made better by worse checkpoints? Because I can't. I really can't. And I know that I'm not the person, I'm not the demographic that that's targeted to, because the moment you tell me your checkpoints are bad is the moment I send the game back and I don't play. Oh, by the way, guys, you can skip this fight completely by doing what I did just then. You are not invincible getting in the vents, but the enemies will pacify when you do. So unless they were jumping at you as you entered the vent, you should never take damage from vents. The reason that room is dangerous is because not only is there a mimic guy, but there's also one of those big dudes that drops down because it's a trap fight. Fun fact, I actually did the fight and I won without dying, but I ended up getting killed up here by the guy that screams, so that's why you don't see that footage right now. So, if you're aggressive, this guy will always swing first and do his 3 hits. But do you see what happened then? That was beautiful. I could slow down his attack just then and talk for 30 minutes about it, because he was designed to fuck you up even if you dodge. So if you have to go back on YouTube and slow that section down, watch it again. That is a 3-hitting attack, right? The first hit and the second hit are spaced just enough that it happens as you come out of iframes. So if you dodge his first hit and you're still in the same trajectory, you will be dodging into an unavoidable attack. The only thing you can do in that moment is cancel into Havoc form or Wrath form. I didn't have Wrath and I didn't want to waste Havoc, but that's how immaculate that hit is. If you do not dodge past him and he follows with you, no matter how good your dodge is, your first dodge, you will never have the time to recover to dodge the second thing, because it's designed perfectly to do that. It's known as a roll catch, and it's something that a lot of Souls games have developed later on. That right there is interesting too. So the creature that attacked me is a boss that you can kill, but I've never killed it because it always kills me. And as you saw, that's the damage it does. It one-hit me. And when it kills you, you wake up in this weird place, which I know where it is now, but I didn't at the time. And what I do, guys, is instead of playing from that perspective, I just kill myself again, and you'll respawn at the Vulgrim point. Now you've done this, if you retrace your steps, you can get to the room where that spider thing was, and it won't be there. I don't know what you get for beating it. You might get something like a soul or a piece of adamantine. Whatever it is, I guess I'll never get it, because every single time it slaps me. And I've never really fought them, so I don't know what they do to really understand them. But there's an area later on where you fight two at the same time. Look at this, by the way. Thank you, Collision, for your gift of death. But look how powerful being in the vents is. Really strong. Ooh, that's something interesting too. When you're in the vent, you can heal, which I really appreciate. It's bizarre that they let you do that, but I'm glad they do. But the section where you fight two of them, you can cheese them, and it's the easiest way to fight them, so I don't know why you'd fight them in any other way, unless you were trying to show off. And from what I can tell, the creature only has two moves. It has a quick hit, and it has a big charge two-handing uppercut. Those are the only moves I've ever seen it do. But because I don't know the timing of them, every time they do it, they hit me. And because they kill me in one hit, I've never seen any more. But it's kind of a cool moment that you can die and not die. So, one of the rare moments of a walkthrough where there's a death in the walkthrough. And it doesn't punish me, which is nice. But something worth discussing is the hollow transformations. So, when you hold the left bumper and you press the face buttons, you can transition between the hollows when you have them. So the flame one I think is B, the lightning one is Y, the gravity one is A, and the stasis one is X. If you hold the left bumper, you'll go back to normal fury, so on and so forth. Each of these weapon elements can have a slot put into it to give you some passive benefits if you want them. I'm not really going to be messing about with too many of those, but there's a couple that I'll talk about later on. And you can transition between them at any time, but the transformation is pretty slow and poorly designed in my opinion. If you do a triangle attack or a Y attack, for instance if I use the flaming nunchucks and then I press to change to the lightning form, it doesn't work. It only works when you're using the Barbs of Scorn. So you can do a whip combo into a Y combo into a whip hit, then change, which will change while you're whipping, and then do a move in the second form, do a whip attack afterwards, change to another form, and that is how you effectively alternate between forms and combo cancel between the different powers. It's kind of cool, but there's almost nothing in the game that demands you do it, and most things will die before you've managed to. So you're not going to see too much of it. But it does exist, so for the people that are calling the combat mashy, it's not technically true. There's truth to it, but you can do complexity if you want to. It's just it's never really necessary or needed. In fact, it can hurt you a lot. God, the fucking lock-on winds me up, dude. I hate the lock-on so much. This guy's being a sneaky bastard too, he's glowing eyes. But these have a glowing tail. You see this? They can't transition between two levels of geometry without doing that animation, so you can just bait that animation and then punish it. If you want to fight two of those insect spawning huge crab things that I killed before Wrath in the second video, They're underneath the train behind me. I have no idea what you get for killing both of them because I've never done it, because I've never cared enough. It's one of those things where it's just not necessary. And a lot of these holes don't lead to anything, which is kind of trolly, which I don't like, personally. But transforming between the hollows should be instant. You should be able to hold left bumper and then just press between the buttons in a cycle, and it should go boom, 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 boom. Fury's hair should just change colours a ton of times and look really cool, right? And be very satisfying. It's not, and I don't know why. It leads to these moments where it just feels really unresponsive and really annoying. So you can't double jump, cancel into lightning, glide from lightning into something else. It just doesn't really work. There are times as well where if you've ever tried to do that into a chain whip, the inputs just don't trigger. It's like you've spent your load and you can't do any more inputs in the air. And it can be done. You can double jump, boost in the air as fire, and then come down in lightning. But the transition feels so awkward that a lot of the times you don't get what you want and it doesn't do what it should. And it all comes from the fact that it doesn't cancel fluidly together with things. And I think it's completely intentional, because if you look at the animation when she does it, her pendant glows, and when it stops glowing, that's when the transformation is technically done, and after that you can swap to something else. But if you swap while it's doing it, it has no effect. And I think the reasoning behind it is to stop you breaking the game. I think if you could double jump and at the max height glide, you could probably do some really scenario-breaking things. In fact, there's a part in the Boneyards where if you could do it precisely enough, you could skip an entire sequence, and it would be really useful because the sequence that you skip is a nightmare. Speaking of a nightmare, this is the run back to the boss, by the way. You're probably not going to see me fight this because I did it off camera. It's not the toughest area to clean out, but these enemies will mess with you, dude. They do a lot of damage. When he screams, he's going to do a charge attack that has a wonderful instant lunge on it. Whenever he gets close enough, he'll just lunge, and then afterwards he can do this wonderful bicycle kick. He's channeling the spirit of Liu Kang, which is preposterously stupid, but what can you say? Oh, and speaking of preposterously stupid, I beat this boss no damage, but I wasn't recording, so I have to use the footage of my first encounter with him, which is me taking a hit, which is really frustrating, but what can you do? So here is Sloth. If you bait his swing at the beginning like I did just then, you can then proceed to hold square, and you will never ever have to worry about him firing poison at you, because he won't do it. And then once you do this, I think 3 times, you'll break his throne, and then it'll transition to the second phase. Here's where things get stupid. See how the bugs are moving in the cutscene? They can move close enough to you, so when it gives you control, they immediately attack you, and it's very difficult to dodge. Also, the game teleports you in front of Sloth, who's going to swing at you now, so getting hit coming out of this transition is a fucking nightmare to avoid. There are 3 ways to avoid it. You can run away from it and dodge like I did just then, which was a very kind one. It's usually not that kind. The second one is activate Havoc. The third one is activate Wrath. So you can either iframe it or you can run through it. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's cool. I think it was designed by a fucking lunatic. And I don't know why they did it that way, but they did. So technically right now, the build that you're watching is not the build that I'm playing on. This is a build that has some arcane counter damage, which is why I'm doing them. And my attack damage is nowhere near as high as it was on my other playthrough. Or on my walkthrough. And all we're going to do here, guys, is I'm going to bait the moves I want and then punish them accordingly, like you see me doing now. A lot of these moves are very well telegraphed, they're quite easy to dodge, but they are slow enough to catch you out, and they have a lot of hit impact, like that one. If you want to know what I was doing there, I was trying to run past it, and because it has a shockwave, I tried to jump to see if I didn't have to dodge it and I could get a big punish. But it has such a big hitbox that you have to dodge it, basically. But this move he's doing here, this 3-hitter, it doesn't have good tracking. So if you can get him to start it and you're on his side, you can run around him and wail on him while he does the full animation, and then when he recovers, he'll fly into the air, which lets you get 3 extra hits, and you can do incredible damage to him. In this moment, if you could omnidirectional roll, you could diagonally roll to his right arm, get around his first swing, and then wail on his body, and there's nothing he can do. But the game doesn't have that. But anyhow, second phase, instead of going vertical and coming down, he does a directional jump, and he loses all abilities to get you off his body. So all you do, guys, is you stand next to him, and you wail on him. Stand on that leg that I'm hugging there. If you stand on this leg, he'll never do his tail whip. The only thing you have to worry about is the detection on the swing he does. The swing is a tricky dodge. And it shouldn't be, but the hitboxes, the active frames, and your iframes all compound in it being trickier than it needs to be. But when you get him into this loop, there's nothing he can do. And you can get him in this loop a little bit in the first phase, but if he goes vertical, you have to move. So it's nowhere near as effective. But that was Sloth, and I made it look very easy, but it's not, guys. When I first fought that boss, I was on him for about 2 hours, and I was getting really pissed off at that run back. So, fingers crossed you don't hate it as much as I did, but hopefully the video helps you stomp on his greedy face. Thank you for watching. You take care now.